Right. So this session is now being recorded. If you do want to speak, but you don't want your video to be recorded, the easiest way is just don't turn on your video, and that's about it. But I will spotlight my video, so hopefully only mine will be recorded. But if you do speak and you don't want your video to be recorded, the easiest way is just switch off the video, and then everything should be fine. So after this technicalities are done with, and I spent about 10 minutes of my willpower just walking through this, today we're going to be talking about personality and relationships, which is definitely one of my favorite subjects, because no man or woman is an island, or are an island. Not sure which one's correct. But the main thing is, it's how personalities interact, which is so very curious. And agenda for the overall 5-lecture program is: first week, we talked about history. Second week, we talked about dynamics of personality and the power of context and the interaction between the two and how it manifests itself in behavior. Last week, we talked about coaching with personality. Today is going to be relationships. And actually, next week, we shall see, because we left it intentionally blank. So whatever kind of stood out for you from the first 4 lectures, at the end of this, we'll agree on what we're actually going to discuss in the last one. What are we going to talk about today? So first of all, reflections on our journey so far. Then a little bit of respect, because that's probably one of the key ingredients when it comes to relationships and personality. Then how we influence one each other, and some takeaways or take forwards. So it's quite straightforward, not rocket science, and hopefully will be done by like 4:10, 4:15. So, as you all hopefully are familiar by now, we're using Mentimeter. So if you go to menti.com and type in 41 91 98 9, I'll be just really curious to hear your takeaways from sessions so far. Even if you attended 1 or 2, doesn't matter. Just anything that you're taking away so far from the personality course. Be it history of psychometrics, be it personality dynamics and context, or be it personality in coaching. Just really curious to hear your thoughts. If you just log into Menti and type in whatever you're taking away so far. Thank you, Natalie. What's particularly interesting to you about this topic? Would you mind to unmute yourself?
Hello, Nikita.
Hey, Natalie.
Yeah, normally it's kind of when we talk about personality, it's personality at work or personality in leadership. I don't see a lot of people in the profession actually talking about personality in relationships. So, yeah.
Yes, and it is kind of funny because it's so key. And when people talk about personality, sometimes, well, I married that person for their personality. I'm talking about their leaders. They can say, well, his personality really grinds me up the wrong way. So people do talk about it as far as personality playing a role in relationships. And at the same time, I do feel that sometimes psychometrics, when you get your psychometric report, however it looks like, you look through it and it gives you the illusion that exists in isolation, that all those bars just exist on that paper and that's the whole story. But really, it's just a puzzle piece, and relationships definitely play a role. Is there anything that you particularly want to find out about relationships and personality, Natalie?
Sort of, how do you, for example, if you have your opposites, how does that play out in a relationship? And are there any sort of broader recommendations in terms of, for example, I always thought, a friend of mine, he's kind of talking at various events about how successful are the dating sites, online. And so what makes them successful? There is always a question mark over that. I think that, yeah, that's going quite in that direction, but yeah, just broader perspective, really.
Absolutely. So sometimes it can work and sometimes not so much. And it depends to what extent it's used as part of the dating process. I profiled my partner with 2 psychometrics before I proposed. It was part of the proposal process. Relying on one tool is purely irresponsible in such high consequence decision-making process, if you ask me. So excellent. So
would you mind telling which ones you used?
Absolutely. Neo, because it's the classical big 5, and Spark to give it the dynamics.
So
that was kind of fun.
I don't know if you're serious or if you're joking. I don't know if you're serious or if you're joking.
No. See, it gets even sadder or funner, depends how you look at it. Because then I was having a pint with my mentor, Wendy Lord, and we were having a few drinks. And I go, Wendy, I think I met the one. And she goes, oh, Nikita, who is she? I go, what's her name? And I go, Olga. She goes, show me Olga. So I take out her Neo profile report, hand it to Wendy. Wendy looks at it and goes, But mate, you totally lost it. I meant a picture. So, well, you know, it's...
It worked.
Well, I'm always reminded about the story about Picasso. When Picasso got into a cab in New York, it's a fable. I don't know how true this is, but I like the sound of it. Got into a car and the taxi driver says, why do you paint women that way? And he goes, okay, how do you see your wife? So he takes out a picture of his wallet and hands it over to Picasso, and he looks at it. And he goes, really? That's how you see your wife? So some people look at pictures, some people look at personality profiles. So yeah, we all have a different perspective. Excellent. So the behavior in context definitely stood out, and personality in context. So what we're going to talk about today is a refresher. That personality, I like the way it has 3 levels. Disposition, what you like. Previously, I used the word trait, but actually Ron Warren corrected me and said, actually, you can have behavioral trait and preference trait. So we're going to have disposition, what you like, behavior, what you do, maladaptive, what you do too much. And we're going to look at other fun things like how your spouse might see you, or partner, or colleague. Now, before we go any further, what is a magic number in personality? Come on, any takers?
5.
5, bingo. Thank you for that. Magic number is 5. It might be 6, but we don't have enough details for that yet. But I like 5. So we have neuroticism, propensity for negative emotional impact, and affect, extroversion, all about positivity and need for stimuli, openness, all about curiosity and exploration, agreeableness, attitude towards other people and importance placed on relationships, and conscientiousness, strengths of drive and purpose. So just as a little bit of fun, if we take, let's say, close relationships, like relationship with a spouse or a romantic partner, if you can go into Zoom and click annotate, does everybody know how to find it? So if you go to more, annotate, and then a little menu pops up. So you can have like stamps, spotlight, text. Did everybody find it? Perfect. So what I want you to do is click stamp and a little heart. And can you click and can you tap what you really appreciate in your partner? Like, do you appreciate their extroversion, openness, agreeableness? Openness. Wow, John, you appreciate neuroticism. Interesting. Like to keep things hot in more ways than one. So yeah. Neuroticism, openness, conscientiousness. See, I read a few studies today, and this was really kind of interesting. As far as do opposites attract or similar personality styles attract? So one study shown something really interesting. If you fall in love with somebody on the spot like that, actually opposites seem to attract more. But if you first are friends and then it becomes romantic, similar personality patterns tend to attract more. What's particularly valued in relationships what's very important to be the same is on openness. So curiosity is really key. So if you're curious by nature, it's important to have a partner who's curious as well. When it comes to the more, the men seem to appreciate low neuroticism in women, but women also seem to appreciate low neuroticism, high conscientiousness, high extroversion, and high agreeableness in men, as far as I remember from a study. So it's also quite interesting as far as what demands we place on each other. And so what do we have? A lot on openness, a lot on agreeableness, a lot on conscientiousness. And John, you're the only one who loves neuroticism. I'm just gonna press it there as well so you don't feel lonely. Right, so what are your impressions looking at this? What thoughts come to mind? Yes, Anna, it looks like you were about to say something. Anyone?
Just looking at it, if it was just those 5 factors, I think it's a bit limited. There's not enough, you know, they've got extroversion. Well, you know, why shouldn't you like somebody who's quite quiet and reflective?
That's the advocation for a bimodal approach to personality. So introversion and extroversion. But we'll definitely get into that. But that's a very good point, Nina, because all of the previous research is being done on classical models of Big Five, where only extroversion is measured. And if you're low on extroversion, they go, you're an introvert. But so there is that to be also accounted to as far as academic research. Hopefully with new bimodal models, which measure introversion and extroversion separately, we'll be able to come up with some more interesting stuff. But yeah, and we'll definitely touch upon the bimodal approach as well. So with that, we seem to value openness, agreeableness, and extroversion. I also found that it's really interesting that quite cross-culturally, agreeableness is highly valued in a spouse. I thought that's kind of fun. You know, people like nice people, at least in research studies. So let me just clear this old stuff.
Nikita.
Yeah.
Martin here. It's not on the agenda for today, but I wonder if it could be highlighted to park it.
Oh, yeah.
With this partner question, if we look at developmental work in adult development, like Robert Keegan, or stages of consciousness or evolution of some kind, and a high neurotic or a high open in 2 different stages of self-development is going to be a very different thing. And maybe it's not the place for it, but I'm wondering where we could locate and leave it aside to talk about kind of development of stages of consciousness and personality at the same time, to take it from being so binary perhaps, or
completely. So how we change each other. Yeah, that's the second part of our presentation, but we will touch upon this. What I found really curious is that people's personalities tends to change more if they're in a relationship with their psychological opposite. If you're with somebody really similar to you, your personality doesn't change as much over adult lifespan. Just as a kind of a interesting little bit of lit review. There's so many interesting studies on personality and relationships, let me tell you. So I also need to mention 2 factors: plasticity, high extroversion, high openness, and high conscientiousness, high agreeableness, low neuroticism for stability. So it's what's called the meta factors, and they're a really curious bunch. Then, first and foremost, everything is standard distribution. So when we talk about personality, we talk about percentiles. So it's how you compare it to the norm group. So if you have like a 98th percentile, you score into top 2% of the population. So quite a strong preference or frequency of behavior or propensity for maladaptive behavior. And if you score like the bottom 2 percentile, well, you're not that particularly fussed when it comes to that personality trait. So it's standard distribution. So when we talk about romantic relationships, because that's more fun, like, you know, our work relationships might not be as salient as our romantic ones, which we had to have relationship in close quarters for the last 9 months. So why not take time to reflect that? Well, colleagues exist in 2 dimensions on our screens. So what do you feel makes a good relationships? I tried to look for a picture of humans, but they were just too cheesy. So I decided to go with marmots. I'm not saying marmots are like the embodiment of positive relationships, but At least the picture is cute. And it's in the Alps, so I guess it's sort of Jungian. Put them Jung loved Alps. So yeah. So spark, no pun intended. Communication, trust, faith, joint purpose. Yep, joint purpose and values are really important as well. Even if personality is quite different, if you connect on your values, it's quite important. Similarity, compromise, respect. Would anybody like to unmute themselves and just share with us their reflections on what they're seeing or why they wrote down what they wrote down? Just feel free to unmute yourself. Hmm? Cool. So everybody's in a reflective mode. So understanding common interests, shared values, similarity, empathy, listening, attraction, yep, honesty. All of those things are very much important. Passion as well, but actually, interestingly enough, I was looking into research on passion, and it's a good and a bad thing. Apparently, like passionate relationships don't tend to last as long as not so passionate ones. So that was kind of interesting. Maybe it has to do something with plasticity. Yeah, Momo.
I was going to say I do enjoy a good argument sometimes, having someone with strong point of views that maybe differ than mine.
So a little bit of friction is a good thing.
I think so.
As long as both sides feel the same way. Excellent. Acceptance, compromise. It's also, not wanting to change people, because that's like, good luck with that. Light bulb needs to want to change. So there's quite a few different ingredients when it comes to good relationships, and all of those are important. And quite a few of those also translate quite nicely to working relationships, all about acceptance, communication, compromise, just as accept and understanding, most importantly. So one thing I'm going to focus on in the next couple of slides is the question of respect. But before we go there, what really messes up relationships? One answer straight from the bat. Two answers. Miscommunication. Nice parallel to communication. Lack of trust, lack of understanding, control, dishonesty. Plot thickens. By the way, leaving the microwave door open also can be added. Like seriously, when you work with couples, when people like these little things really build up over the years, like 20 years of leaving the milk out of the fridge after you made your evening cup of tea always adds up. So close the door, put the milk back in the fridge, because I swear people forgave affairs more easily than that sort of stuff. So these little things, they're not little. Sweat the small stuff. Ego, money, doubt, fundamental differences. Yeah. Which kind of contribute to miscommunication and dishonesty. Any reflections people want to share on what really messes up relationships?
Nikita, did you see someone put murder?
Murder. Oh, that's going a little bit far, and that escalated quickly. But it's all anonymous, so nothing I can do here. But hypothetically, that could be definitely a problem. You cannot have good communication. Yeah, selfishness. But it's interesting that this one stood out for you. So were you the one who wrote it down? Just asking. Yeah, there's a lot of different things. No love, bad sex. Yeah, sex is an interesting one for many reasons. But basically, when people are satisfied with sex, it predicts very little of correlations with happiness in a couple. But when sex is bad, it predicts a lot of unhappiness in a couple. And what else? What else? Oh yeah, highly neurotics are more dissatisfied with sex over time. Surprise, surprise. By the way, if you really want to go into that, if you look into Big 5 sexual behaviors as Google Scholar, you'll find some really interesting articles. And swiftly moving on. So what we're going to focus on now is a little respect, because that's one of the absolute key parts to personality functioning in a relationship. So for me, there's 3 key pillars to this. 1, fundamentally, everybody sees the world differently. And I know it might sound like a cliche, but everybody does, because there's no such thing as objective reality. As we know, reality is constructed inside your cranium in darkness, suspended in liquid, with very little sound coming through. And the way it's constructed, it takes the stimuli you're getting from your senses, be it eyesight, sense, smell, and it imposes onto the schemas of the world, of how the world should be. And therefore, that's how you see the construct of the world around you. So we all have slightly different visions of reality. And don't even get me started on memory, because that's also impacts it. So accept the subjectivity. And statistically likely, if somebody is doing something to get on your nerves, statistically likely, 99 times out of 100, they're not even aware it's getting on your nerves, not to mention intent. But we often assume, like, you're doing this specifically to get on my nerves. Like, you're leaving this milk specifically to get on my nerves. Or you leave in the microwave door specifically to get on my nerves. The other person doesn't even know it can be important. So therefore, going back to the importance of communication and never taking for granted that people see the world differently. Appreciation that all personality traits have something to offer. So similar back to Nina's point, that high introversion has something to offer and to love it for, such as being great listeners, and high neuroticism have things to offer. So every trait has a benefit. Also, every trait can be overdone. And most importantly, give people a benefit of the doubt. Like, we're so sure when somebody does something and you go, that's the way they did it. And that is why, because that's how I see it, done. And therefore, give them a benefit of the doubt. And when you fall out, especially with your psychological opposite, think who you go to have a chat about that person. Do you sit down with this person when you're nice, fresh, and bushy-tailed over a cup of coffee and you discuss what happened? Or you have a falling out with this person and you go with somebody very like-minded for a drink and you tell them one-sided side of the story, which is yours, and they confirm that you're right, they're wrong. You know, that might be soothing short-term, but long-term might not increase chances of positive communication. Would anybody else like to add anything on respect when it comes to personality?
Nikita, Adrian here.
Hey, Adrian.
Change my background, I beg your pardon. There's an old maxim that says respect has to be earned. Are you saying, if you say give everybody the doubt and everybody's got something to offer and we all see the world differently, are you saying we should credit people with respect and they lose our respect, the similar, or do they have to earn our respect?
I think there should be like a baseline of respect. And then if people earn it, it goes up. And if people lose it, it goes down.
Okay.
But I think there should be like a baseline neutral respect level that we meet people at. Not to think of them too positively, not to think of them too negatively. One standard deviation from the mean.
Oh, yeah. Would you say the same for trust? Or is that something we're going to cover trust later on?
Oh, well, trust is actually a very interesting one because it has to do with this consistency between your behavior and your trait. Because if you behave consistently, people tend to trust you more than if you behave inconsistently. So people who change a lot, sometimes it's hard to trust them because they keep changing. Yes, Martin.
Thank you. In the sense of relationship, Adrian, relating to respect, I think when I find myself with someone where their mindset is one that I will have to earn their respect and prove it to them that I deserve it, it probably cascades against itself, because as someone with high neuroticism, I start to sense into that and feel it and get myself in a state that will mean that they'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy not to respect me.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a hypothesis I hold about how if some thought could come that each person at least has some potential, some value, some credibility, some wholeness to begin with, as you said, minimum baseline, Nikita.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Martin. Nina.
But Martin, could that be because they're approaching you in a suspicious way and they have that suspicious manner, you know, apprehensively approaching you? Oh, shall I trust you? I'm testing you. And all these, you know, sort of thoughts perhaps are conveying themselves to you.
Something like that. Certainly, if I think of, say, in the coaching relationship, sometimes a classic comment from somebody once who's 5 or 6 sessions in and said, I thought you'd have scoped the project by now. Certainly the respect was taking time to develop there. But if I think of CEO meetings I've been having for business development conversations, some of them I come away with the sense of a mutual conversation that may have been valuable or not, but at least a mutual conversation. And others I come away from that position of, you prove yourself to me. You prove yourself to me. You call the meeting. What do you want? I'm exaggerating the energy, but you're right. That suspicion is there.
Yeah, it's also a really interesting one because, for example, in couples with high agreeableness and a highly neurotic partner, often the highly agreeable partner will try to make the neurotic feel better because they start to feel that that person's neuroticism is triggered by them, rather than actually understanding that this is a baseline feeling of neuroticism another person experiences, and actually asking them to understand, to talk through their anxieties and to depersonalize it. This is not about me. And this is where one of the most important things of personality difference come in couples is that it's that person's personality, is how they're wired. And you can rewire it with time to an extent. But this is who they are, and this is where the acceptance comes. It's when the highly agreeables try to force good on the neurotic. That's when it really gets messy. Like, you know, it's, yeah, because it might be really counterproductive because the highly agreeable lower neurotic might be doing things which make them feel good. But to a high neurotic, it might cause a very adverse reaction. And everybody means well, but actually it causes quite a lot of misconception. So therefore, you know, it's good to unpack this on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee of like what happened on Thursday evening between meetings. So yeah, because somehow in couples, people want to sort that stuff out immediately after the flashpoint. And it doesn't not always leads to better results. Sometimes you just need to stop digging. But hey, I might be projecting. So when we talk about respect, I also want to kind of highlight that some psychometrics do take this into mind. So the reason we're using Spark here is because Spark is pretty much one of the tools that I'm familiar with that does this. So basically what it says, overextended or under stress or in the grip or derailers, however you want to call them, stress response. People might perceive opposite personalities quite differently. So let's say highly extroverted personalities might perceive being observing as detached and aloof, being poker-faced as serious and withdrawn, and intimate as passive. So good listeners have nothing to say. Similarly, as introverts can perceive high extroverts as can be alone, but they just want to be sociable. They can perceive them as overbearing when they just want to show how they feel. And they might perceive their wanting to speak up and take charge of the situation as controlling. So in the stress response, you can start seeing personalities in a different light. And that's what's really important. Because basically, that person is still themselves. It's you who is stressed. And that person hasn't changed. It's your state that's different. And taking responsibility for that. And some miscommunications happen so often. Like I often see high extroverts when they're presenting, and the introverts, more introverted, sit there being poker faced. Extroverts treat it as rejection. So the introvert is sitting there thinking, reflecting. Extrovert goes, you don't like my idea. And extrovert goes, whoa, whatever gave you that idea? I mean, it's even worse in couples. And I'll tell you this is an actual example. Saturday morning, kids are in bed, idyllic coffee, breakfast, sun is shining through the window. And the extrovert puts down the cup of coffee and goes, do you even love me? And the introvert goes, what question is that? And the extrovert perceives this lack of emotional expression over years as rejection, as a lack of affection. But the introvert might really love them and might want to write them really beautiful letters, but they don't freaking read their emails. So maybe setting up an email account, which will they just use for each other, separate ones, to communicate romantically and show affection could be a way to explore this. But another key thing, let's say, introverts often perceive extroverts as needy. Like they need attention. Like, for example, quite often introverts will describe their extroverted spouse as Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. Interestingly enough, it's like I'm married to bloody Tigger. And by the way, it goes both for females and males. It's non-gender specific. Tigger applies to both by the looks of things. And it's really interesting because this is personality differences playing out. And it's just being accepting of the other without trying to change them, not thinking their behavior is about you. It's actually more how they are. Does that make sense? Any thoughts or reflections or questions people want to share?
Yeah, because this sort of lack of affect that introverts do show, they do often have this poker face, and it can be quite off-putting in a team situation or in a relationship situation. And sometimes it can be quite hard, speaking as an extrovert, to say, yeah, okay, well, that's them, and have that acceptance. It's quite a hard lesson.
Yes, it can be heartbreaking. Like one time an introvert was just getting too tired of living with her spouse during lockdown. It's like, can I move into our holiday home for a bit? And the extrovert is like, so you want a divorce? And the introvert is like, no, I just want some time alone. Do you want a divorce? And the extrovert is like, no, I don't want a divorce. And it's like, it escalated really quickly. Yes, Adrian.
I was just going to say that the situation you described, not the divorce and the holiday home, the previous one, I think it was Nina was talking about. I find it particularly difficult when I'm coaching or running a session online, when I'm just seeing, the sort of pen pictures of people and can't really see how they're reacting. And if they are introverts, I think it makes the assessment of whether they're listening and taking things in and thinking even more difficult than when you're face to face.
Yeah, or when you do it.
I think the technology doesn't help as far as that's concerned. Personal view.
Oh, I completely agree with you. This is why I always give clients a choice between phone, Zoom, or Skype. Some people just want to do it over the phone, so they want to have the stimuli of the face. And on the phone, when I'm talking with an introvert, I count to 20 seconds after they replied, or if I pose a question. Because as an extrovert, my response is, hello, anybody there? It's just like, well, they're just thinking.
You told us, you said you counted to 10 on one of the previous sessions, Nikita.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
it's 20 now, is it? Are we low reacting so much that you're having to count to 20 as opposed to 10?
Not particularly. Stella.
Introverts need 20, sorry.
Well, because I tend to count fast, it's just 10 then, in reality. Yeah, but I also felt this, and it took me years to modulate my style to introversion. So when I'm doing introversion session, my style is very different from this. And I can only do 1 or 2 a day max. Otherwise, I'm just absolutely spent afterwards. If I have, like, say, 4 sessions with creative extroverts, and we're just laughing about metaphors of nuclear reaction as far as a power source internally, and we can all go into meltdown and all of this stuff, I'm very energized by those sessions. But if I need to coach a reflective introvert, it takes more energy. So I will never have more than 1 or 2 a day. Yeah. Any other thoughts on introversion, extroversion, any other facets? Yo, Martin.
Back in the old Myers-Briggs days, a very experienced practitioner who used to use it in a Jungian way quite deeply and used it for spiritual development as she was a nun, actually. So that was the journey she was with people. But she had a lovely expression in the contribution of extroversion and introversion to other functions in the MBTI approach, that one wanted it right for always and one wanted it right for now. So the extroversion, say my extroverted thinking might just want a solution for now. But if I had an introverted thinking, it wouldn't be okay to have just a solution for now. I'd want the solution for always.
Yeah, especially conscientiousness plays into it.
Very useful, yeah.
And inspiration driven. I mean, with extroversion, it is about stimulation as well. Because one of the difference between introversion and extroversion is cortical arousal, is how much stimuli do you need to feel excited by the world around you. Extroverts need more. So, you know, coffee, cigarettes, music, all three, alcohol, stimuli. It's like when we're back in open plan offices, I go, you can spot an extrovert by what I call the meerkat effect. So when they're bored, they'll stand up and they start looking around who they can talk to. It's nothing personal. It's just they need stimuli. And the introvert's like, please, not me, because they don't have as much need for this stimuli. And they might find, let's say, a party and too much noise actually overbearing. This is where alcohol comes in. Because the only of the big five, your personality, alcohol changes, it increases your extroversion. And the idea behind it, that it dampens your cortical arousal, so you can put up with more stimuli in your environment. So hence, when more introvert people come to a party, socialize with a cat, have a couple of drinks, socialize with humans. It's just getting themselves kind of numb to this interaction. I'm not advocating alcohol as a way to mediate your personality, but yes, things like substances do affect your personality, and people study that. So if you're interested, Google Scholar, Big Five, alcohol. Because why not? We can do evidence-based drinking now with references and everything.
So you're saying that alcohol dampens down the cortical stimulation of the introvert?
Yes, so they can put up with more stimuli. I mean, then extroverts need even more stimuli. So, you know, it's an interesting dynamic. Yeah, so one of the things about this respective personality is not only about, let's say, relationships, it's also about work, because whenever using any models of psychometrics in a corporate environment or relationships or what have you, to me, what's really important is that it values everything equally. So let's take an example of growth and fixed mindset, right? It's quite popular. And I think, you know, it can be useful, but I like to tweak it a little bit. And the way I tweak it is that basically, first of all, I map it on the big five. So this plasticity stability maps on really nicely onto growth and fixed mindsets. So you have plasticity, which is low conscientiousness, high openness, high extroversion, high outcome focus, so low agreeableness. So here you have plasticity. And then you have stability, which is people focus, introverted, down to earth, and high conscientiousness. So you have this alpha, beta, as it's called, or plasticity stability. So growth mindset, I think, fits plasticity really nicely. However, I just like to rename fixed into nurturing mindset. And I prefer attitudes, actually. So you have a growth attitude, pushing the boundaries, friendly with chaos, sometimes a source of chaos when left unchecked. And you also have the nurturing attitude. So you have innovation on this side and you have implementation on the other. But so often we kind of praise innovation and we take implementation for granted. But to me, it's kind of a cycle. It's cyclical. You have innovation drives implementation, implementation drives innovation. And when companies get that right, it's quite magical, because then you have manifestation. But I feel if you praise one or the other, or you say one good, one bad, it doesn't give you that critical psychologist angle, which is it depends. Sometimes growth is good, sometimes nurturing is good. It's both. And another thing, both can be overplayed. So plus too much growth mindset, which doesn't respect nurturing, can descend into chaos. Similarly, if you're too much on the nurturing side and not enough on the growth side, yes, it can lead to fixed and being stagnation, but both can be overplayed. So whenever dealing with any model in the workplace, I try to figure out how we can make both good. So we have the depends angle and how both can be overplayed. So it's a more balanced view on human behavior and personality. Of course, we love to hear, growth mindset. Some people now talk about infinite mindset, but we're in a finite planet and stuff like that. But it's really important that this respect percolates through the different models. What are people's thoughts on this and reflections?
Nikita, I work a lot with salespeople, and there is always an interesting discussion goes on that says, do salespeople prefer to be liked or respected by their customers? And some of them are still of the opinion that people buy from people, and if my customer likes me, then they'll buy from me eventually. Despite the overwhelming evidence that customers buy from people they respect and who they see as being capable of doing the right thing for them. And in some salespeople's mind, this causes enormous turmoil, that should they do the right thing or do the thing that will please the customer if they're in that quandary.
Yeah.
I won't say it's as deep as a crisis of conscience, because I'm not too sure salespeople have consciences, because I know that's what everybody's thinking on the call now. But it's certainly one of these self-limiting beliefs that some salespeople have. The customer's got to like me.
Yes.
But
And
I think speaking as I was a salesperson, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry as my first career. Started off as a pharmaceutical rep, hospital rep, sales manager, national sales manager, and then went into occupational psychology.
Obviously.
Yeah, but the thing is, it just depends on the sales, environment. And in that sort of environment, I would say, especially in the UK, and I'm not talking about the US or whatever, I think they have a completely different model. It's called relationship selling, but they have to respect you. You have to actually understand what they understand. And so as long as you can come across as very credible, and they trust you, then obviously they're going to, listen to you and not. So I wouldn't agree with what you were saying about salespeople perhaps only thinking that, they have to have a good relationship. You have to come across as a credible person.
I think I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. Because you said they trust you as part of it. Yeah. Where they rely solely on relationships, it's ineffective.
Yeah.
And the Challenger sale from 10 years ago proved that, if you believe their research.
Yeah. I mean, from my side, what's kind of key is what I love to do with salespeople is show them this model and say which particular quality you find hard to work with in clients. And everybody usually has a different one. And they go, oh my God, we all find different things difficult. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. This is why you should talk to each other. Like once you have a difficult client, talk to somebody else, they might give you a suggestion. And different parts of the sales cycle are exciting. So for example, people who are really high on plasticity and really low stability, they're really entrepreneurial on it, they get bored quickly. So they might be really good at opening doors, really good. But when you ask them to write a proposal, man, they start off the first passage and go, can be asked. Not to mention even relationship management. And some people really good at relationship management and not really good at opening doors. And to me, it's exactly when sales teams get it right, when they work as a team, but it's hard to get that commission and reward and all this that reflects it. But when they do this, it actually, I find, potentially is more effective because we all find rapport building easier with different people, different personality traits. We find different personality traits difficult, and we get excited by different things. So how we can leverage that collective intelligence, that's what's really fun. And what else about sales? And about being liked, people high on agreeableness put a higher premium on being liked. People high on low on agreeableness put a high premium on being respected, especially within their in-group. Like they don't really give a damn how most people think about them. And I already gave that example, but I had a leader who was really high on logical and really low on empathy. And that's another thing. People who are low on agreeableness and empathy doesn't mean they're not empathetic. It just means they have a clear differentiation between in and out group. And basically, when I said, well, look, let's call him Ben. Ben said, well, Nikita, this is like wrong. I'm really empathetic. And everybody on the team said, yeah, Ben is like the most empathetic boss we ever had. So he explains the difference between in-group and out-group. And he goes, yep, that's me. And the person next to him goes, Ben, that's very harsh. And he goes, you're part of the in-group. What are you worried about? And this is why Lumina uses the term emotionally stretched. Because if you're highly logical, you can't understand why they're worried about people outside the family. Like, why do you care what they think? They have no impact on your life. So this is why they see it as emotionally stretched, while the logical can be perceived as argumentative. So when an empathetic person goes, well, you know, you're being argumentative, the logical one goes, no, I'm not, because there are things that are being logical. So, you know, this empathy and being liked is also impacted by personality. Right, so yin and yang, order and chaos, nothing new. Right, now we'll go back to Martin's previous point, just for the next 20 minutes or so. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reactions, both are transformed, said by Carl Jung, to which actually my partner, who I profiled with two psychometrics today, corrected me. And she said that actually when Jung said this, he also said this occurs really rarely because it requires a really deep contact between two people. And that doesn't happen very often. So there's a caveat to this popular quote. So I have a question for you, good people. Can you think of a time when someone had a profound impact on your personality? So feel free to think about this one. But can you think of a person, you know, that really had an impact on you? And you can just jot down any thoughts, how it impacted you. Did it make you kinder, tougher? You know, God knows. Classically conditioned you to clean as a child. I don't know. My ex, for all the wrong reasons. I highly recommend therapy to help with that. I can empathize. Father, yep. Made less assuming in questions thanks to a humanistic supervisor. Lovely, yes. A bit of humanistic supervision, especially if one's lower on agreeableness, can be really helpful. Bully boss triggered me to be passive aggressive. My father, when I got into trouble, makes sense. Abigail, I noticed you raised your hand.
Hi, it was actually me who put my ex for all the wrong reasons. And I wouldn't have come on, but then you mentioned therapy. But I went through therapy, and therapy actually rechanged my personality again. It kind of made me think more. I completely lost who I was when I was with my ex, but assumed that was just me then. I went through therapy, realised none of it was actually me, and then started to find me, which is really bizarre. And this is why I find personality so fascinating, is that certain aspects and people that you'll meet, experiences that you have, will slightly alter your personality. And that's the part that intrigues me, as to whether we know our personality, would that make a difference, and can we adapt going forward?
Absolutely. I'm very happy that therapy helped and that it gave you such an experience of change of your personality. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, and things do change us. Like, for example, to me, it's like a book, How Can I Help by Ramdas and Neil Gorman, really changed who I am to an extent, you know, I was a slightly different person by the time I finished the book than when I started it. You know, the changes are not, I'm not sure we can ever capture them in data, but you feel it deep down. You're not quite the same person. So sometimes, you know, when you go out of a relationship or after a deep conversation with somebody or a good therapy session, you feel a little bit changed by it. And it's a really interesting phenomenon. Sometimes, any other thoughts or reflections on this topic?
Hi, can I jump in?
Sure.
I thought rather than write it, I'll just say it by voice because it can be a bit controversial. But over the summer, I've been listening a lot to Jim Peterson, and I don't agree with everything he says. I just want to say that out there. But I thought his take on responsibility for young men quite interesting and quite impactful for many. I don't know if you have an opinion on him.
I think we can all benefit from cleaning our room every once in a while. And he has some interesting stuff to say on personality.
I thought the camera was off.
Yes, the camera is off. Yeah. Oh, right. Right. So yeah. No, sometimes cleaning your room is just cleaning your room. But yes, responsibility, etc. I think it is quite important. And I think actually quite a lot of people took away something positive from his lectures as well. It kind of went out of control at some points as well. But hey, that's the magic of YouTube and stuff like that. We have no idea how things will develop. But yeah, well, so you felt that it had a positive impact on you, or was it negative? Just curious.
Oh no, definitely positive. I think it got me to think a lot about things that I haven't thought about in the past. Mm-hmm. Specifically more about, I'm very extrovert and very open, and yeah, it's just brought me to think a bit more about my responsibility, about being a bit more organized, a little bit more focused. So I thought it was quite useful, at least to me.
Absolutely, and this is why in personality, let's say if you're not particularly high on conscientiousness,
exactly,
it's really important.
Very low.
Yeah, well, see, I only have half an hour of willpower a day. So, but the thing is, what's really beneficial with such stuff, when you're really low on a particular trait, you might have a huge benefit, return on investment of your effort. So if you score like 5 percentile on organized and structured, just dialing up to 20th percentile can have like almost life-changing impact. Literally just a little bit more. And this is why, you know, people think, oh, and another thing I like Jordan Peterson saying, you know, change your life by 1% a week. You know, you can tweak your personality by 1%, let's say, a month. But this really adds up over time. And this kind of approach of little tweaks. And if you're going to change your personality, always have a spotter, somebody who will give you feedback that they notice that you listen better or interrupt less. So you get that positive feedback going. Yeah, and you can work on yourself. Like, can personality change? Debatable. There's lots of factors, as we talked about, your genetics, etc. Can you develop your personality? Absolutely. And especially when it comes to your behavior. So yeah, and it's a journey. Talking about the journey.
And interesting, I'd just like to add, you know, I put down father because when my father died suddenly, when I was a teenager, a young teenager, it created a very strong focus in me. And it's a horrible thing to say, but I don't think I would have developed that. I became extremely focused on my studies. I wanted to achieve things. I wanted to make him proud. So yes, that you know, this sort of conscientiousness sort of kicked in. So that drove my academic studies, I think.
Thank you for sharing that, Nina. So yeah, and sometimes reflecting with the client, you know, the events which shape them, who they are, is quite an interesting exploration. So what traits do we appreciate in others? Empathy and honesty, clear and candid reasoning, because that's also an interesting question to explore as far as what do we appreciate in others, what others bring to us. And sometimes, let's say, I really appreciate high conscientiousness because I have like zilch of it. So yeah, By the way, one of the sure ways to increase your conscientiousness is to marry to somebody who's more conscientious than you. That's another fun research study. Openness, energy. So sometimes we appreciate what we share with others. Sometimes we appreciate what they bring to us. Being non-judgmental towards us. Yep, that's definitely a keeper. That the traits I have less of, or let's say sometimes it's a common ground. Because like, for example, I love terms, being psycholexical and all this, of language, like, you know, common ground. Like, you know, it's common ground of personality. It's the overlay as well. Or, you know, we're my better half. Or together we complete each other. There's very interesting turns of phrase in the English language, which might be indicative of something to do with personality. Honesty and being understanding. Yeah, it's just we apply the same we want for ourselves as well. But there's a lot that we do appreciate. And sometimes when you do appreciate something in another, give them feedback that you really do appreciate this. And you might be surprised at what feedback you get in return as well. I think you can never say too many thank yous and be grateful too much for what other people bring to your life. So on that note, what really tries your patience in others. I like the cat. Mm-hmm. Low conscientiousness. Yeah, nobody's closed-minded, show off, one-sided view. Yeah, they don't see it from your perspective. Overbearing, rigidity, stupidity, lateness, which is also like low conscientiousness to an extent. Imprecision. That's a wonderful word, you know. Also the ones I admire. Nice. Double-edged sword. You know, it's the traits you marry for somebody, it's the traits you hate later when you're stressed out. Oxford English. That's a very specific beef. Nice. Attempts to change me. Yeah, can empathize. There's a big impact that people who want you to perform better. It's very different from people who want to change who you are. There's dogmaticism. Nice. What's also I absolutely love about these things, we get ticked off by different things. And that's also quite important to remember. And what ticks you off in others might be sometimes a good illustration of, you know, what you want to work on yourself. But the quick thing here is that whenever you get ticked off with others, it's always interesting to explore what's happening for them. So why they're doing this. So when you approach their behavior, which frustrates you, with curiosity and mercy and empathy, you might be surprised at what things might happen. Like, why are you not listening? What's going through your mind? Why are you showing off? Of closed-mindedness. Well, what particularly you don't like about particular policies in the government or something like that. High neuroticism. Well, what's going through your mind? Sometimes they're just anxious and they need to talk it through and being accommodative by it all. Lateness. What happened? It might not be about you. Because when somebody's late, I always think they disrespect me, you know. But really, you know, something else might have happened which caused them to be late. Yeah, this closed-mindedness, not listening, low openness. Yeah, and with low openness, it's not that they particularly low openness, but they're very selective what they're curious about. So maybe sometimes finding out what they are curious about and working with that can be helpful. Irresponsibility, yeah. Well, maybe that's a high inspiration driven. Maybe they won't want to be more playful. So there's a lot of different things going on here. But just to kind of summarize it a little bit, here's some useful tools to keep in your pocket. One, my favorite question, what are you hearing? So when you start to fall out with somebody, what are you hearing? Because we discussed this difference of perspective and worldviews, and asking that question, what are you hearing right now, could be really good to illustrate this. And could provide some really interesting information from this, and asking really open-ended questions. And what are you hearing? Or let's say if somebody starts crying a little bit, or wipes a tear, or starts laughing, and you can't really understand what's going on, always worth asking, what's going through your mind right now? Just curious, what's going through your mind, or what went through your mind? Because usually, you know, signs of high information processing. So it's interesting what sort of a chain reaction took place in their head. Also, watch out for people rolling their eyes, because that's potentially a sign of disgust. So somebody rolls their eyes at you, you go, what's went through your mind right now? Just that question, what are you hearing right now? It's quite essential, and also works for extroverts who think, hey, introverts, instead of like, you don't like my idea, asking the person, what's going through your mind right now? That can be also beneficial. Or if somebody says, well, this is interesting, they go, well, what's interesting about this? You know, trying to get this a bit more individual perspectives onto the floor to discuss. And count to 10 or 20 if you're dealing with an introverted client, as previously discussed. Would anybody like to add any of other tools or suggestions for what might help dealing with somebody quite different to you?
Nikita, it was along the lines of what you're hearing, and it was something I was thinking of earlier on, which is the relationship of body language to personality type. And I believe there has been some studies that have looked at, you know, can you tell a personality type from body language? But it's about, you know, bringing that into the mix as well. You said in terms of, you know, what are you hearing? You know, it's like I've had the situation. I said, you know, to my wife, you know, she's come in, how are you? And she said, fine. And I know the answer is, that's good. The answer is, oh, you don't sound fine. Do you want to tell me about it? Yeah, of course I do. You know, so it's bringing those in. But and in terms of personality and people getting on or not getting on, especially from early contact, that's where body language is potentially going to be. You're going to see before you even get into trying to find out about personality. You'll make your mind up whether you like this person, whether you want to run away from this person, whether you want to marry this person, before you then start to have more opportunities to find out more about their personality. So it was just bringing that into the mix of the personality type and using the two together somehow.
Absolutely. And body language also plays a part. And this is what's really interesting now with Zooms, there's less of it. And therefore, right now, I always say to my clients, you know, if you fall out with a colleague or they're doing something you wouldn't expect them to, rather than necessarily getting immediately frustrated, I go, there's a WTF moment. When you're not yet frustrated, but curious what the hell is going through their mind. So at that point, schedule a 15-minute chat in the morning with a coffee and just say, John, like, what's happening for you with this project? I'm just curious, before frustration sits in.
Could I give you an example of that, Nikita, particularly on Zoom and like we're using now? I wear glasses for distance, yeah, but I can read fine without them, yeah. And as you get older, your eyes improve remarkably. And so my screen, which is on the windowsill in my office, is in that sort of dead zone. If I put my glasses on, I have to sort of go back and I can't write anything or type anything. If I take them off, I have to lean forward and look at the screen like this. And recently somebody said to me, you're really intense in these meetings, aren't you? You know, when people, and I'm saying, no, not particularly. I was interested, but I was just trying to see, oh, you lean forward and you stare and this, that, and the other. I said, yeah, that's because my eyes have changed and I can't get the screen and my eyes and my notepad and this, that, and the other in sync. So I have to lean forward, see what's been written, and then come back and write down. Yeah. Nothing to do with being intense whatsoever.
Yeah.
But how wonderfully misinterpreted.
I know, this is brilliant. I love asking questions with a team. Like on Menti, what I do is I usually ask people to do a word cloud. I say, what qualities do you appreciate that Adrian brings to the team? And I would ask Adrian, type in what colleagues might not know about you, which you would like them to know. So you get a bit of gratefulness and a bit of what people don't know. And sometimes, you know, there's glasses or stuff like this does come out, that people go, look, guys, this is not about you. When I switch off my camera, it's because my kid comes in. It's not that I don't care about the meeting or stuff like that. And it can be really interesting of what people assume to what people want to let other people know. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Welcome.
And also, I really like this phrase, behind every complaint lies a wish. So when people feel, are complaining about the relationship, ask them, what do you want instead? Also, if you're interested in relationships, highly recommend the podcast by Esther Perel called Where Should We Begin? It's recordings of one-off couple sessions, really good stuff. And she also does it for work. So if you fancy something to listen to, Esther Perel, Where Should We Begin? And it's full of better tips than this. Right. So what I'm really curious is, what are your key takeaways from today? I just need some elevator music. Views very different, have to be more understanding and aware of different personalities. Absolutely. And also give time for those personalities to shine, and asking lots of interesting questions. Like, how would you describe yourself? What do people often get wrong about you? Any other takeaways? I can take off my glasses and be intense, but perceived as intense. I'll correct myself. Respect, lots of experience sharing from fellow participants. Really nice. Loved it. Love to hear that. Different interpretation of some traits, yes, which might be state dependent. So the way we interpret traits might be dependent on our state. Now, I shouldn't get so excited by such a phrase, but I do. That's just how sad I am. But different story. So, excellent. So about the differences, the value of respect. Now, moving on. What would you like to explore in the next session? So it's completely up to you. It can be a mishmash of previous topics we discussed, or we can focus on something else. So just type it in, and I will try to weave as much as possible into the conversation. Neurodiversity and personality. Nice. That's definitely a topic and a half. But we will definitely cover a little bit of it. Anything else? Mental toughness. Oh. How to make the most of various personalities, make them shine. Perfect. Anything else? Personality misuse and job selection. Resilience and personality. It's interesting. It came up right under mental toughness. Wonderful. Well, we definitely have a few subjects, and I'll weave some more in there. But next week, it's going to be Thursday, 3 p.m. as always. Same Zoom link. This video is going to be up on YouTube, hopefully in the next couple of days or so. And in the meantime, I wish you all a wonderful weekend, romance and all that good stuff, understanding, respect, listening, maybe some wine. I'm just speaking for myself. And we can also cover different personality tools. But most of all, thank you everybody for attending today, participating and sharing your insights and wisdom when it comes to personality and relationships.
Thanks, Nikita. Great session. Enjoyed it. And apologies for being late.
No worries.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nikita. It was amazing. And the relationship between personality and wine, I think it's worth having a formal study on that. Because
absolutely,
there has been so much into this, and I do this experiment all the time. Right now I'm not able to do that. In France, I invite people home, like 10-11 people, and I don't drink. So I give them drinks, and then I note down their behavior changing. And I have a lot of notes on that, how people change differently after 1 drink, 2 drink, 3 drink, 4 drink, like that.
I know. You should give them a pre and post personality, 10 item, big 5. I'm going to fill with the next drink. So you want a gin and tonic? Sure. While I'm making you a drink, can you fill out this quick questionnaire? Right. So we can plot it then.
That's a very good idea.
You've got the perfect situation. You could do it at your psych pub meetings on a Friday.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
By the way, on that note, Nina's right. We also meet up for drinks online, 6 p.m. on Friday, same Zoom link, if you want to drop in.
Have your Neo ready.
Yeah, you can have your Neo and glass drinks at the ready. Psychometric in one hand, alcohol in the other. Sounds like a plan.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Excellent. We'll hopefully see you Friday, good people.
Thank you. See